Alright, so I've been trying to figure out how the best way to script this video would be, and I didn't want it to be like a long, ranty video. I wanted it to be on point. I wanted to separate it into a couple of issues, but honestly, fuck it. It's kind of just going to be easier to get this out all at once. It's late at night when I record this, and I'm kind of just chucking it out there to get it out while I have the downtime to do it, as my schedule has been very busy lately. So I've been doing a lot of grinding of this season for Diablo, and I want to discuss some of the pros and cons currently with the system. I'll first start off by saying I am an Eternal Realm player, which is great because I really didn't lose too much. Now, that being said, there's no real big difference between the season and the Eternal Realm. Now, my first problem that I see coming is that the end of the season, if you're on the homepage, is August 6th, which means we're going to have no content for a long time if the player base gets bored of just doing the same few activities over and over again. So, what do I want to discuss? First things first, let's talk about the things that'll take the least amount of time. I do not like the fact that legacy items got rendered kinda useless. A lot of the gear that you as a player would run essentially has been rendered moot, has been rendered kind of bullshit, just because of the fact that the game wants you to go towards a lot of the new content that exists. That to me is a bit of a downside as a player looking at, okay, how do you want this system to go? Well, problem is the system isn't particularly good. Doesn't particularly make too much sense in terms of why we're running the things that we're running. While I'm right here, I'm going to salvage these. Now, the problem that you have is that there's not much of an investment cost in your old gear. You're going to get most of it back, unless you've, like, super rolled it to Kingdom Come by trashing all your legacy gear. But I'm a character that had multiple full stash tabs full of gear that was for trade, just to come into the game and find out, hey, you can't trade it. Onto the system of trading, by the way. You can pretty much trade whatever you want as long as you don't fuck with it too much. So, like, for example, this ring right here. Hey, let's say I want to trade this. You know what I do? I can drop it on the ground. Anybody can pick this up. Anybody can pick that up. I can trade whatever I want to, pretty much. So, I think that's a good mechanic because I can actually trade uniques. You know, if I have extra copies, like, look at all these extra copies of Frostburn and Fist of the Fate that I have. You know, hey, somebody's looking for a copy of these, I can trade it for you. No problem. There's no sweat off my back. I'm not using them. And I can also keep my high rolls, so I have access to some... I'm going to pull this out for later. I think a problem that we have in the game right now is they're introducing new gear, but they're not introducing new slots for us. So, let's talk about a mechanic right here, which is the Codex Power. Right now, the Codex of Power, the way the Codex of Power works is if you take a piece of gear and you bring it over to the blacksmith and you salvage it. Let's say I was to salvage this Ring of Red Fury. Let's say this was a power, a Codex of Power entry instead of a unique.
I'll keep my forge hot. Return soon.
Excuse me. I could salvage that and it would permanently upgrade it into the Codex. So whatever your highest roll that you sacrifice is in the Codex. I think all this sorting mechanic and favoring mechanic is bullshit, mostly because the favoring mechanic is specifically tied to that individual character. If you have multiple characters, you have to set different groups of favorites for each character. I don't like that. Same thing, the whole, if it's equipped on your character, it'll give you a notification. If it's in your inventory, it'll also give you a notification. So I think that system is kind of stupid. I had a tempering later. Tempering is going to be the big one I rant on about. Now, while I like this system, that it is the highest roll possible, you'll always get it. So, sacrificing an adaptability means you get the highest roll possible. What this means is if you were a character that was running legacy gear, and you want to take that legacy gear and salvage it for new gear, you would automatically be upgrading the gear that you had to its highest roll. So I could just walk over to the occultist and put a new high roll on. You know, I can take this, I can say I'll put adaptability on, and, you know, voila, now it's a higher roll than it was before, etc., etc.
Right.
Having the codex, however, where you still have to find individual powers and salvage them is problematic, because I can tell you for a fact some of the powers that are in these tiers are relatively difficult to find, which means you have to spend a decent amount of your oblos gambling to get what you're looking for. So for example, let's say, you know, one of the hardest ones in the game to find are resource aspects, because you could only find them off of rings. I gotta come over here and I gotta keep gambling until I can get a recharger aspect for sorceress, or until I can get, you know, the vulnerable one for necromancer, or until I can get adaptability for anybody. I have to keep gambling and gambling and gambling and gambling. That's not even talking about getting a high roll on the gear, because you'll notice a lot of these I don't have high rolls on. I have close to high rolls on. That's fine. That's honestly fine. The next problem that I am going to discuss a little bit, this is something other people have talked about. Yellows are completely devalued now, by the way. Yellows are pretty much worthless to you. The only reason you would have 4 yellows is veiled crystals. Now, a lot of people complain about not having enough materials. Oh, I'm constantly running out of gold. Oh, I don't have enough veiled crystals. See, I don't have that problem. You want to know why? Because I pick up all my yellows and I salvage them. And when it comes to gold, usually I will trade gold for uniques. People put up in the chat, hey, I'm looking for this. I'll come over to my stash, go to my trade category and say, hey, yeah, I got this unique. I'll trade this for you. Blah, blah, blah. Couple of minor notes that I want to hit on. I love the way Helltide works. There's not a Helltide up right now. Fuck. I love the way Helltide works. The only problem that I have with Helltide, so this is a normal Helltide area over here, so we're just gonna go with this and assume this, right? So, the monster density in the ambushes is nice. The problem that I have is it's very difficult to leave a Helltide. It's very difficult when you're in a Helltide to actually be able to do anything else. Now, this makes sense, but it causes some problems. So, especially near the end of Helltide, it's very difficult to get to a chest to spend your cinders. You can earn cinders like crazy in a Helltide, which is great. We want to do that. There's plenty of activities to do. There's plenty of things to kill. You're never just... You can make a loop. Every area of Helltide has a generic loop that you can do. Like this is... I call this the Morrowind loop, where space around Morrowind. I take the back route in, right around here. I go and clear out this area. I clear this area. There's an event that spawns here. I snake in here. I snake down here. There's an event that spawns here. I forget if it's here or if it's over here. I do this area. I do this area. I do this area. I do this area. I come down the coast here. You know, there's sometimes a chest that's right here. By the time I've done that loop, I have at a minimum 250 under the old Helltide. Now, easily I'm at about 350. 400 cinders, if not more. So if the chest does spawn here, it's very easy to do. Blood Maiden is incredibly challenging for no real reason. She doesn't really have a great reward for the challenge that she offers. A lot of players can clear her. She doesn't really do much. She takes a lot of damage and she moves around. She does a lot of damage and she moves around a lot. She has a lot of one-shot potential. She's not really that great to fight because there's no real reward to her. This is the problem that we have with like the roaming bosses like Kickaroff with the Helltide Assassin, and this is the problem that she has. Kickaroff doesn't have a significant enough reward. She doesn't have a significant enough reward. Now, you can farm spam her, which is why she doesn't have that reward, but at the same time, there's no real incentive to go and keep doing her. all in all, I think Helltide just needs to have, like, there needs to be, like, a Helltide specific item, like Beacon of Safety, something like that, where it just makes you immune, right? It could be something where it's like, you have 30 seconds, you're completely damage immune, you're completely crowd control immune, but you can't activate anything. So you can't use your abilities, you can't dodge, you can't use your horse, you cannot do anything except interact with chests, interact with the environment. That, to me, is what I would create, something like that, that'll just drop, just to give players the ability, for example, to open chests. Because a problem that will happen... Right, here we go. We got a Helltide up. A problem that will happen in Helltide, right? I'm gonna... Let's say that this is a... Let's say that these are chests. Just so I don't have to teleport there. I'll be at the 5-minute mark for Helltide and go, okay, I need to spend my chest. So I'll be right over here doing an event. I've already done this chest. Let's say I want to do this chest right here. So I horse my way over there. I get off my horse. Because my threat meter is too high, I get ambushed as soon as I get there. Well, I can't interact with the chest. I have to kill things. Okay. And then a wave spawns. I have to kill more things. So now we've gone from 5 minutes to, let's say, less than 2 minutes. I open that chest. If I have more cinders to spend, oh well. I don't get to spend them. Because... even if I make it to this chest over here in time, my threat meter's gone up. Another wave is right there. You will just get slammed repeatedly with wave after wave after wave of enemies, and makes it impossible, even on the highest clear build, because the game just, oh, you cleared this wave? More. Oh, you cleared this wave? More. Oh, you cleared this wave? More. Because there's no real way to speed up the interact time. Like, the interact time I'm opening a chest should be much shorter if that's the case. It should be similar to what it is in a dungeon. Other than that, I absolutely do love the Helltide. I think it's a great farming activity. It's no longer a farming activity, it's a main activity. The other than that problem where it's like you just can't interact with anything, you can't do anything because there's so many waves of enemies, that's the only real knock I have against it. I like that world bosses are back to dropping 925 gear mandatory. I'm glad that they went back to that. I like the fact that if you do a dungeon where enemies are over level 95, like anytime enemies are higher than level 95, this dungeon right here, which is 97, all of the enemies will drop loot that is level, that's 925 or higher. So max level gear. If you can get to the point where you can do this dungeon, you are endgame farming now. I like that. That's great. That means I can easily filter my trash. Because I'll do a run on a lower tier with a friend of mine, and I'll be like, oh, this is not 925, this is not 925, this is not 925, and salvage it with some rare exceptions, you know. So say something like this because it has +3 to bash on it. So I'm keeping that because it has +3 to bash on it. Excuse me. If I make a bash barbarian, it's useful. So what else? I like Andariel. These are the maps for Andariel, the shackles and the pincushions. I like Andariel. I like that we have a new boss besides Duriel that we can go farm that has Duriel drops, not just the same fucking Duriel. I personally find Andariel to be slightly easier than Duriel, but that's also because this character I'm playing just fucking cooks. One thing I want to mention. My Stygian stone is gone. There we go. Stygian stones, which are used to summon super powerful, the uber bosses, the level 200s, are incredibly rare. You get them from the pit, and you get them from world bosses. Right now, that is it. I believe they're buffing that in this patch that's going to come tomorrow. Trying not to talk about too many things that aren't affected by the patch. But I really think that the Stygian stones should be a bit more common. My advice, butchers are incredibly rare right now. Butchers should have a guaranteed mandatory drop on certain hard-to-get items, given the fact, like, I know that they're going to drop scattered prisms is the new thing. They're going to have guaranteed scattered prism drops, because, like, non-Eternal Realm characters have a hard time finding these things. They're buffing world bosses, they're buffing treasure goblins to have more of these, butchers having more of these. This is my thing though. Butchers should also have guaranteed drop rates on, you are guaranteed to get something like a body part. You are guaranteed to get a sticky in stone. You know, you are guaranteed to get something like that. You're guaranteed to get a special type of key. I think if they had a special type of key that would automatically open any chest in the game. It could be a Helltide chest. Doesn't cost cinders anymore. You use the key. It could be a silent chest, so you're not using your whispering keys. It could be a Mutterlock chest. Any type of chest in the game, call it a skeleton key, right? Any type of chest in the game, it can open with no cost whatsoever. That to me would be a nice drop that's unique to the Butcher, given the rarity that the Butcher spawns right now. Like, I've gotten one Butcher this entire patch so far. And I've been playing a decent amount. Alright. The main meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about. I think balance is fine. I definitely think they over-tuned a couple of things. So, will the dominate glyph for all classes got fucking neutered, which is because barbarians just have so much overpower in their kit. They wanted to nerf overpower damage. The problem is this also nerfed overpower damage for other builds. Werebear Druid, Earth Druid, Blood Necromancer, which were the other predominant overpower users, got absolutely bullied, while Barbarian still hits absolutely dump truck levels of hard on overpower, because they have so many procs of overpower, and they have so many ways to buff overpower damage in their builds. It's not really that big of an issue to me. None of the changes, balance-wise, really bother me. I think they've neutered a few builds in particular. Summon Necromancer right now, because your summons just do so much. The old build for a Summon Necromancer, which was Death Speaker's Pendant, is basically worthless. There's no reason for you to do that. You basically don't even bother running damage skills on Necromancer. You just buff your minions and let them do all the work for you. And it's a unique, which I'll get to in a minute. So I want to start with the Codex power. Alright? You have these tempering recipes. Now you have to find these tempering recipes in-game. You do not get any tempering manuals unlocked. There are no guaranteed drops for tempering manuals. Now, in addition to this, you can't filter in the tempering manual page here like you can in the Codex of Power. To me, this stuff right here should be over here. If I want to interact with tempering manuals at all, the easiest way to do it is to come over to the blacksmith and interact with tempering this way. Now, this is something I want to talk about when it comes to tempering. So tempering is something that's really only done to ancestral legendaries. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. The problem is that this is a twofold issue, because it devalues non-uniques that are not absolutely essential to your build, okay? This is a basic bitch barbarian that plays basic bitch and Deathblow. So I have to run Battle Trance for Frenzy. I have to run Ring of Red Fuhrer for Deathblow. I have to run Overkill for Deathblow. And I don't need to run Yorgets, but I do like running Yorgets, because it has good stats on it. Here's the thing. If I wanted to run other uniques, let's say I wanted to run Razor Plate or Rage of Hagaroth, because Rage of Hagaroth would be really good for cooldown reduction in this build. This is a cooldown reduction build. Can't run this. I can't justify running this. This goes bye-bye, you know? Say I want to run an Azurath as a one-handed weapon. Can't do it. It's not essential to the build. I'm not running it. And the reason is because we cannot temper uniques. I can't temper these. This unique I cannot temper. I can't temper this unique. Now this is because uniques are supposed to be, well, unique. The problem to me though, tempering an item makes it account bound. Why can't I temper a unique? It would open up, even if I'm only getting to the ability to temper one slot, because you get to put 2 tempers on an item. Alright?
Use it well.
The problem is that there are so many uniques in the game, right? So looking through this, Godslayer Crown, never seeing use. I have an Andes, never seeing use. I have one build that could make it work, and I'm not gonna, I don't have access to that because I don't have enough character slots. Blood Artisan's Cuirass, it it sees play in one build that I have. Razor Plate, never gonna see use. Raiment, never gonna see use. Hagaroth, never gonna see use. Linless, never gonna see use. Ancient's Oath, not gonna see use right now. Like, some of these uniques that I could make a build around. I used to make builds around certain uniques. Great Staff of the Crone is a good example of that. I would make a build around a unique when it would drop. Now, can't do that. Why? Uniques aren't worth it anymore. There's not enough character slots as well. That's a minor complaint I want to voice. But, alright, so just as an example, okay? Let's say I get this Fractured Winterglass right here to drop, okay? I make a build around this. You know what the problem with this is? I can't interact with this at all with the tempering system. Which means I lose out on some very valuable things. I have to say, they knock tempering out of the goddamn park. Great job. 10 out of 10. Love it. Why do I love it? Look at my character right now. Alright? 90% death blow damage. 100% death blow damage. That doesn't have death blow damage on it. This should. 95% death blow damage on it. That's a lot of death blow damage. On top of my Ring of Red Fury. And on top of my Overkill. I'm making a death blow build. I can build into it. Now, this is the problem I want to talk about with the tempering system. Okay? Because I love the control that it gives you over your build. Let's talk about the bad part. Alright? So look at the 6 categories here. They can only go onto certain characters. I do need to pull out... I need to pull out one of these real quick. Just as an example. Alright? So, tempering time. Pants, chest, and head are always going to be defensive and utility. Now, 90% of the tempering manuals in the game for the character you are playing are going to be useless. So let me give you an example. Natural Schemes. This is Thorns, which is only good if you're running Thorns. Crowd Control Duration, which is terrible. And Barrier Generation, which is terrible. I'm never running this. Bye-bye. Worldly Fortune. This is Lucky Hit Chance. If you're running a Lucky Hit build, sure, great, good job on you. Outside of a Lucky Hit build, these are really just fillers if you have nothing else. Now, this is specifically for Barbarian. Steel Grasp and Upheaval Chance to Stun. I have to be running either of those skills. A Hoda Barb, no value. Deathblow Barb, no value. Double Swing Barb, no value. You have Stun Duration, great. Do you have a skill that can stun? Because you can't pair Lucky Hit Chance to Stun with Barbarian Control. Concussion, not great. Most of the plus ranks to a passive are terrible. Now, I always run Outbursts and Tough as Nails. I like running them because, you know, it's just passive Thorns, passive bleed off of Thorns. It's very easy for triggering certain effects, okay? Here's the thing. On this Barbarian, if you will notice, okay, every single utility slot here is plus ranks to Tough as Nails or plus ranks to Outburst. Because that is literally the only tempering manual for the utility slot that's worth it to me. Because I don't use Steel Grasp, Upheaval, or Concussion. So the only thing I could roll for is Stun Duration. You can easily brick an item off of having to roll for a stat you can't use. Now, if you look defensively, for example, there are some very unique things that are in here, okay? Obviously, if you run one of these, the cooldown reduction is great. If you don't run it, you never use this manual. Lunging Strike, great. If you run it. Most players don't run Lunging Strike. Raid Leader, Invigorating Fury, those are terrible aspects. You're never running either of those passives, so this is useless. Barbarian Protection, Imposing Presence, Martial Vigor, God Royale, Defensive Stance. A couple of these are okay. I'm not going to justify plus ranks of either of those skills when I could either fix a whole fucking resistance slot or just get maximum life and total armor, which this category has been neutered, by the way. This category is abysmally bad because they're just so low rolls now. Like, oh yeah, an extra 500 armor. Like, the resistance is nice, but you do have to keep rolling and rolling and rolling. So, like, unless you're a character that's just terrible with resistances, a majority, like, here, I rolled poison resist because, you know, I needed to fix a resistance. But most of the time, you're not going to do that. Right? Same thing, let's look at, while we're on the subject, okay, we did defense, we did mobility, or we did utility. Let's look at mobility. This one right here, you have movement speed, which is good. You have mobility cooldown, which is very difficult, because there's not a lot of skills that have that mobility tag on it. There's a few, like charge, trample, teleport. Nice. Most of those have other things. So for example, look at Barbarian Motion right here. This has mobility cooldown reduction. This has charge cooldown reduction. And it's stronger. It's at 10%. This one's at 8%. Same thing if you look, I believe Druid has one for trample, which, same thing. Sorceress has one for teleport. If you want an actual mobility skill, you're going to run that. The main reason why I would run this one over this one is because there's 4 affixes. So if I just want flat movement speed, it's easier to roll it off of this than it is off of this. I feel that this should have a higher movement speed value than 12.5, given that this one is 12.5. Just my 2 cents. I have another idea for fixing tempering, by the way. Like, this is the thing. If I'm running charge or leap, right? If let's say I'm running charge only. I only have 2 rolls here that are any good, which means I have to keep rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. Not to mention, by utility, I only want to run Thorn Body. If I get Thorns while fortified, I'm fucked. I mean, if I build a fortified build, sure, that's great. Not every barbarian builds fortified. A lot of barbarians don't run a fortify heavy build, which means Outburst and Tough as Nails are the only ones that are any good. Alright, I want to talk about the next problem. Alright, let's look at resource. Okay. Alright. Worldly stability. You have resource generation, which is kind of terrible. Lucky hit chance to restore resource. Only going to see use in a lucky hit build. And resource cost reduction, which is the main thing most people are going to run. Most people are going to just straight run resource cost reduction if they're running a ring. Because a ring has to have resource cost reduction. Amulet, you can kind of fuck around with a little bit. But you have to have resource cost reduction. Look at your other categories. Ultimate efficiency. Okay, casting an ultimate restores primary resource is terrible. Yeah, it's a decent chunk. It's up to 45 primary resource. This is just more effective. Because you can double stack it. This right here, where it's cooldown reduction on an ultimate, that is a chunky amount of cooldown reduction, by the way, on an ultimate skill. Unless you're making a pure ultimate build, like Cataclysm Druid, you're not running that. Most builds aren't running ultimates these days, because ultimates aren't very good. Weapon attunement. Okay, this one for Barbarian is kind of hard to justify, because you have the resource generation with a specific category. This means you have to make a build specifically around that category. Alright? Now this build is obviously based around my one-handers. My one-handers are what I'm using because I'm using Frenzy. Here's the problem. I don't give a flying fakakta about resource generation with dual-wielded weapons. There's better things for me to run. Like, adaptability would be better. Especially if I'm using a basic skill to generate. If I'm not using a basic skill to generate, these are all useless. And even then, there's basic resource generation, which is right there. This is terrible. Brawling efficiency. Cooldown on brawling skills. That's fine. They have Kick and Warcry separated from the other two, because you can get the other two off of mobility, that being Charge and Leap. So technically, you can double stack. That's good if you're making a specific brawling heavy build. The cooldown reduction's always nice. And if you are doing a brawling cooldown build that doesn't use resource, then you don't need resource cost reduction. So that's an option for you. Same thing, Weapon Master efficiency, right? I don't use resource, but I do use Death Blow. So having the Death Blow, the Rupture, the Steel Grasp, or the Weapon Mastery cooldown reduction is great. It's nice to have. Now, the fact that you can put resources on amulets is fantastic. I've been asking for that for a while. Here's a problem that I have, okay? This will go into my last category to explain. Amulets are supposed to be jack of all trades. Amulets do not get the weapon affix. This is a big problem to me. Let me explain. So, weapons get an offensive and a weapon aspect. Why is that important? Weapon aspects, okay? Weapon aspects contain a number of decent categories to them. Now, Barbarian has way more options than other classes, so Barbarian is a terrible example for explaining this. But, just to reiterate, alright, so this is based around Earthquake primarily. Leap, Ground Stomp, these aren't too great unless you are running a brawling build where, you know, you're running specifically Leap, Ground Stomp, Charge, Kick, stuff like that. Earthquake size, Earthquake duration, that's good if you're running Earthquake. Bleed. So you have Exposed Vulnerability and Pressure Point, which are kind of terrible. Fillet duration, Rend size, Rupture size. Rend size is good, Rupture size is good. These make them easier to hit, cover more enemies. Fillet duration kinda sucks. I don't necessarily want to run this one on a Bleed Barbarian, but there's not a lot of other options as we'll get to. Sandstorm, this is Dust Devils. Dust Devil size, Dust Devil damage, chance for Dust Devils to cast twice. Fantastic. If you're running a Twister build, you're gonna run this as your only weapon augment. See? Berserking, double swing size. If you're double swing Dust Devil, you're running Sandstorm. If you're Whirlwind, you're probably gonna run this for the size. Frenzy duration is worthless, because it doesn't do what you think it does. Basically, it just lets you keep the attack speed up longer, lets you keep your stacks up longer. It's not really good. Berserking duration, that's kind of nice. I've been building into that for this build, but that's also because this build really doesn't have any other options. Furious Augment, this has the Bash Cleave that everybody's going buku for, which I'll get onto my thoughts on that in a few minutes. Hoda size, Upheaval size, good if you run them. If you don't run them, you're not running this. Kick Vulnerable duration, that's honestly kind of terrible, although it does create a permanent, like, Kick can make an enemy vulnerable for like 10 plus seconds, which is pretty insane off of one kick, but I'm not gonna waste this augment slot for that. And then the lucky hit. Why am I spending so much time talking about this? Well, pretty much any single build that you're gonna builds around one key aspect. Like again, this character builds around Death Blow. All of my shit's Death Blow, right? So when I'm tempering, Death Blow damage, Death Blow damage, Death Blow damage, Death Blow damage, Death Blow damage. That's what I'm going for, right? If I need, on a weapon specifically, right? I'll show you how to do this. Not necessarily with this weapon, but let's grab a trial weapon. Trash this on. Yeah, you're a shitty weapon. Alright, show you what we're gonna do. I'll show you how to temper this, right? Say I want to use this for Barbarian, okay? I want to use this on this character right here. So, weapon. Don't use that. Don't use that. I can use Berserking duration. That's it. Don't use that. Don't use that. And don't use that. Great. So this is what I have to do. Temper. Double swing size. Okay. Now, under the offensive category, there's the fail-safe right here, which is Natural Finesse. Now, this is not what I want, but I can use all of these affixes for the most part. I can use flat damage, I can use damage to crowd control, which is situational, but it can work, and I can use damage to close, because you're pretty much always going to be in close range. Damage to distance is like the one category, so I just pray I don't get it. Sure, I could use damage while berserking. Sure, I could use damage with dual wield. Sure, I could use death blow damage. But I can't guarantee I can roll into those, whereas I can pretty much guarantee I'll get something valuable here. So, what do? Well, I need that berserking duration, so guess what? I have 5 tempers that I can roll, which means I get 4 shots at this now. Because I didn't get the first try, which is my free try, I get 4 shots at this. I got berserking duration. Now, it's not the high roll, it's only 81%. Here's the problem. I can't re-roll this now. I have to stay with this. Why? Because I can't risk... I'll brick the weapon here, because I'm going to salvage anyways. I can't risk, okay, I'll re-roll and get a higher roll, right? Nope, I got something new. And it's worthless. So now I have to go back, re-roll again. See, now that's a higher roll. I'm not risking that. Let's say I re-roll it just for the sake of re-rolling it, you know. Now, if I use all of my rolls, I come over here. Well, I actually have a roll left. So, let's try and go for the death blow, right? Wait, wrong one. Let's try and go for death blow here. Death blow damage. So guess what? This weapon would be a perfect weapon for me now. Because I don't have to do any more re-rolling on it. I have the 2 stats I'm looking for. Now, let's say I didn't get the roll that I wanted on death blow. Okay? My only other option on my last roll would be to roll natural finesse to roll a good stat that I can use. And if one of these categories is screwed, I'm screwed. The weapon's bricked. Which means if there's a greater affix on it, guess what? Weapon is terrible. I'm salvaging this. I was just using it to test. That system is really bad. Now, I've been spending a lot of time shitting on the game. What are my recommendations to fix it? Now, I already gave you my recommendations for Helltide. I think there should be an elixir or an item that you activate it and it gives you like 30 seconds of immunity, but you can't attack or do anything, just so that you could use it to like open chests. Because that's a big problem that I have. There's no real way to get out. I'm happy with dungeons. Honestly, I'm happy with the pit. I like the way that the pit runs. I think the pit is really good. I do wish that the rune shards that you need in order to open it dropped more frequently. They only drop from Nightmare dungeons that are level like 40, tier 46 and above, or tier 47 and above. So you have to run that dungeon every now and then in order to get rune shards. I don't like that mechanic. I wish rune shards would be more common, so I don't have to go and... If I want to run nothing but the pit once I hit level 100, I should be allowed to just do that. I shouldn't have to go run a dungeon to get shards to then go run the pit.
I forge more than horseshoes and nails.
For masterworking. So masterworking, I don't have any problems with. I'm going to be clear on that. I actually like masterworking. So let me explain. Okay? Now, the materials that you need to get it get progressively harder and harder. That's fine. I'm not supposed to masterwork this until I can clear a dungeon that earns the materials for it. I'm good with that. If I want to, I could reset it, right? I could reset the masterwork ranks. It would cost me some materials. It'd cost me 5 million gold. If I want to do that, I'm fine with that. I like the system where it crits. The only issue I really have is that certain things can't increase except off of that crit. So for example, I am running this helmet specifically for the damage wall berserking and aggressive resistance, those 2 stats. If I want to increase aggressive resistance, I could only ever increase that off the crit, which means I have 3 possible opportunities to increase it. Meanwhile, the damage wall berserking stat will passively go up every single time I'm upgrading, even though it won't go up by a lot. It'll only go up 5%, but that's better than nothing. I do wish there was a way that you could increase some of those things, because it can be kind of annoying. Like, let's say you're using a weapon that's plus ranks here, alright? let's say I'm running an Oculus. I want to go masterwork this Oculus. And the only thing I'm looking for is ranks to teleport. I'm not looking for the damage, the evades, the evade cooldown. I'm only looking for teleport. I can only get it off of the crits. That creates a system where when I go to masterwork this item, if I don't crit on my next roll on aggressive resistance, you know what I do? I would have to reset it and try again. So, you know, on my level 4, okay, great, I get the crit. On my level 8, I get the crit. Okay, great. I invest more materials. I get to level 12, I don't get the crit. Reset. That to me is a bit frustrating. I think there could be a lucky hit chance to increase that. Fixing tempering. To me, it's simple. You should be allowed to temper one roll, one category on a unique. One. So this Yorget's Helm of the Mighty would still only have either a defensive or a utility. But I could still temper it, because it's account bound anyways, once I temper it. I just can't trade it anymore. That would give a huge benefit to uniques to let them be viable. Because, you know, look at this battle trance right here. Damage reduction from close enemies. I would love to put natural finesse and get damage from close enemies on here. You know? And overkill. I would love to put death blow damage on here. I can't put anything else on it, just that one roll, right? That would be a system to me that I would appreciate. Even if they told you, hey, you only got one shot at tempering, like one roll in total. Maybe a free roll and then the one temper, I would be down for that. Because normally you can't interact with uniques. Giving me interaction is good. A fix to me, the amulet should be the jack of all trades. It should have a weapon aspect. The reason why I say that is very simple. Now, Barbarian has 10 million freaking weapons they can use. They got 4 possible rolls. So by having overkill here and not rolling a weapon aspect, I'm fine. Here's my problem. Any build that requires a unique weapon is cooked. What do I mean by that? Alright, Druid players. You want to run... Where is it? You want to run a Flesh Renderer? Great! You lose that on your weapon aspect now. On your weapon temper. You know, if I'm a Great Staff of the Crone user, great! You lose out on your one weapon tempering slot. You know? If I'm a sorceress and I'm using something like a Staff of Endless Rage or a Staff of La Essence, great! You lose your one weapon tempering aspect. The other fix that I have is very simple. We discussed the tempering manuals and how they're terrible. A good example of this is utility. Utility, some classes can get good value out of utility. Sorceress utility is pretty good, in my opinion. Necromancer is really limited. You're really just rolling into one category. Barbarian's limited. You're rolling into one category. Druid is fucking dog shit. All of my druids are running freaking Worldly Fortune Lucky Hit because there's nothing to use on them except the companion guide. So if you don't run companions, you're running Worldly Fortune. Because your only options are Natural Schemes, which is terrible, Worldly Fortune, which is okay, and then the companion one. My advice would be this. Because you see this with a lot of freaking resources. If I'm not running a Call of the Ancients build, right? Let's say I'm running Call of the Ancients build. I don't get any value out of the other 3 rolls here. You know, if I'm not running Kick, I get no value out of the other 2 rolls. What the fuck? I guess I was AFK for too long. They should tie it to where an individual skill has its own manual. And that, to me, would open up the possibilities. Which, if I can get back in on my character, might lock me out. I'm locked out. Alright, so... yeah, I'm locked out. Bro. So, what do I mean by that? Alright, so take my Barbarian. Say I want to run a Deathblow build, which is kind of what I'm running here. That's gotta lock me out. Say I'm running a Deathblow Barbarian, alright? If Deathblow had its own tempering manual, what would you have in it? Put it under offensive, put it under weapon if you want to. Either or, okay? You have 4 rolls on it. So you have Deathblow damage, okay? Deathblow cooldown reduction, Deathblow size, lucky hit, Deathblow has an X% chance to trigger some random effect. Add what you want to it. Steel Grasp. Steel Grasp gets its own. Now, Steel Grasp could be maybe under utility, okay? Steel Grasp range, Steel Grasp cooldown reduction, casting Steel Grasp grants you a certain amount of resource, lucky hit, chance for Steel Grasp to XYZ effect. See? And you could tie specific manuals to specific categories. So basic manuals could go under resource. Yeah, I'm locked out. I'm just gonna have to finish talking and be done. You could have basic skills would be under the resource tag. You could have core skills be under the offensive tag or the weapon tag. You could have your defensive, obviously under defensive. Most characters have some type of random category like Conjuration for Sorcerer, Curses for Necromancer. Barbarian has the brawling skills. Those could be under utility, for example. Your wrath skills, weapon masteries, sorceress masteries, bone spirit, corpse tendril, that corpse explosion, that sort of stuff. Those could be under the other tag, whether weapon or offensive, that you didn't use for the core skills. Resource. You could have the ultimate tree under resource, or you could have the ultimate tree specifically for amulets or some shit like that. Each skill in a tree getting certain options, to me, would be beneficial if I want to cater a build around it. Because, one thing I will say, okay, I'll give you a good example of this. Ice Sorceress. This is Ice Shard Sorceress right here. I have one weapon aspect, which is a cold aspect, which is chance for Ice Shard to cast twice. That is the only roll out of 5 rolls in that manual that is any good to me. Okay? So, I have to keep re-rolling to get that one affix. Why, instead, couldn't I just get 4 rolls, all are Ice Shard, and I have to choose one? You know, you can't make a super Ice Shard Sorceress, but you're guaranteeing at least one buff to Ice Shard, right? I gotta have chance for Ice Shard to cast twice, extra projectiles on Ice Shard. Ice Shard has a % chance to overpower. Ice Shard deals X amount damage to burning or stunned enemies. That would give synergy with Tal Rasha. Extra projectiles would benefit for its Ice Shard Pierce effect. The cast of Ice Shard is already there. Ice Shard chance to overpower would be nice because Sorceress doesn't really have overpower. So adding something like that. If I want to target farm one of those, I can. But it's not going to brick my build and my weapon because I can, in theory, use any of those affixes. Chain Lightning Sorceress, same thing. Chance for Chain Lightning to cast twice. Chain Lightning has a chance to overpower. Chain Lightning deals bonus damage to frozen or burning enemies. Synergy with the other classes. Chain Lightning has a chance to bounce 4 additional times. Again, synergizes with what you have already. If I want one of those, I target farm it. It doesn't brick my weapon. See where I'm going with this? Same thing. This is Fire Sorceress. Flame Shield gets its own affix. It's under the defensive category. Right now they have things like Flame Shield duration. That's fine. Leave that. There's Flame Shield cooldown reduction. That's fine. Let's leave that. Flame Shield size. That's fine. Let's leave that. How about another one? Let's throw in healing increase from Flame Shield upgrade. You know, you heal 50% of your missing life. Let's say you could increase that more. Maybe you have another thing like hitting Flame Shield generates resource. Great. Have another thing. Mana cost reduction while in Flame Shield. They took that out of your skill tree. They could put that back there. This is a charge barbarian, right? Charge gets its own manual. Charge damage, charge cooldown reduction, lucky hit, chance for charge to apply a random status condition on an enemy, whether it's daze, stun, freeze, etc. Charge generates resource on use. See? If you're running a charge barb, any one of those is good. You know? Here to talk about him. This is an upheaval barbarian. Upheaval damage. That's another thing you can do too. Plus ranks to a skill, which is missing. That's a huge thing that's missing to me. It's impossible to get plus ranks to skills now. Plus rank to upheaval, upheaval size, upheaval damage, chance for upheaval to stun. There's upheaval. If I want to run, put that under weapon set, right? So if I'm running 4 weapons, all of them I'm trying to specifically get +2 to upheaval, which gives me +8 to upheaval in total. I can do that, but now I'm missing the damage, I'm missing the crowd control, and I'm missing the size on it, right? If I want to run maximum upheaval size, which you can do now, I put that on all 4, great. I'm missing the damage, I'm missing the ranks. You see where I'm going with this? Anyways, that's my thoughts. Easy fixes. The game clearly wants me to get off, so get off and stop talking. So, you're welcome, game.